So let's put it all together. We have an equation with an A value, a B value, and a D value. Now I'm not going to put the C values in just yet. We're going to deal with just A, B, and D. What does the A value tell us? The A value tells us the amplitude. The D value, the D value tells us the sinusoidal axis. Now this question is about the period constant. What is the period constant? In this problem, the period constant is 20. And what do we do with the period constant in order to find the period? We take 360 and we divide it by 20, and that will tell us that the new period length is 18 degrees. So from the start of my graph to the end of my graph, for one cycle, it would be 18 degrees across. Now, that's the full period. So how much is each tick mark worth? Each tick mark is 1/4 of that. So I like to call that the quarter period. And the quarter period would be 4.5 degrees. In other words, I would have 18 degrees from beginning to end, and each of my tick marks on the graph, this would be 18 degrees, each of my tick marks would be 4.5 degrees. So it'd be 4.5, then 9, then 13.5, and then 18, and that's all 4 tick marks. I would still draw the graph the same way. I would use my sinusoidal axis, right here is 5. My maximum, and I'll make that dot dashed because it's not the axis. My maximum would be 4 higher than that at 9. My minimum would be 4 lower than that at 1. And I would graph sine. Middle, high, middle, low, middle. The only difference is this point isn't 365 anymore. It's 18,5. The stretch, it has made it shrank, and I could actually draw 20 cycles before getting to 360. So that period constant tells me how many cycles I could get in my circle. So let's take a look at this one. Let's just look at the period constant and the period length. What's the period constant? It's right here, 1/2. Now let's do this one in radians. Let's just practice in radians. If the period constant is 1/2, then the period is 2 pi divided by 1/2. Well, 2 pi divided by 1/2 is 2 pi times 2 over 1. We multiply the top and the bottom to get rid of that fraction. And the period length is 4 pi. So my fourth tick mark, here's my 1, 2, 3, 4. That fourth tick mark would be 4 pi. And each quarter period would be 1 pi. So we'd have pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. And we would draw a graph, maximum, midline, minimum, midline, maximum. And there would be our graph. Okay? So let's take a look at these last two. Practice them on your own. Stop the video and see if you get the same answers that I do. So I decided to do this first problem in degrees and the second problem in radians. For sinusoidal axis, it's 3. The amplitude is 7. The period constant is 18. To take the period, I did 360 divided by 18 is 20 degrees. Each quarter period, in other words, each tick mark will be worth 5. My minimum was 3 minus 7, -4, and my maximum was 3 plus 7, 10. Turn the video off again and make your graph. Okay, my midline's at 3, maximum at 10, minimum at -4. My 4 tick marks, this one goes to 20 because that's the period. Each tick mark is worth 5. 5, 10, 15, 20. And I've graphed it as a sine curve because the equation was sine. Try the second one. Make sure you use the period constant with radians. All right, this one was a little trickier. So the sinusoidal axis is -1. The amplitude is 4. The period constant is 6. That was the same. But 2 pi divided by 6 equals pi over 3. And a quarter of pi over 3 is actually pi over 3 times a fourth. Pi over 3 times a fourth is pi over 12. Each tick mark is going to be worth pi over 12. My minimum is at -5 and my maximum is at 3. Make your graph and come back. So I've got this first tick mark is at pi over 12. The last tick mark is at pi over 3. That's the end of the period. So this is pi over 12. The next one would be 2 pi over 12, which we actually reduced to pi over 6. 3 pi over 12, which would reduce to pi over 4, and then pi over 3. So always reduce your fractions if you can, but if nothing else, know that the first one is at pi over 12, and the last one is at pi over 3. And it started at 0, 3. So our graph, our points would be 0, 3, pi over 12, negative 1, pi over 6, negative 5, pi over 4, negative 1, and pi over 3, 3 again. And it's still the cup shape. That's all there is to graphing sine and cosine curves.